I'm 32 years old and I still remember the exact feeling of standing in my parents' driveway on a Sunday afternoon, holding a check for $4,000, telling myself this was the last time. It wasn't the last time, not even close. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm the younger one, the one without a husband, without kids, without what my family calls a real reason to need help. I'm the one who, for 6 years, showed up. Every time the heat got shut off, every time my brother's car payment was late, every time my mom called with that particular tone in her voice. The soft one. The one that started with, "Honey, I hate to ask." I showed up. I work in healthcare administration. I'm not rich. I have a one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city, a used Civic I paid off 2 years ago, and a savings account I rebuilt from scratch after my late 20s nearly wrecked me financially. I did that on my own. No one helped me move. No one co-signed my lease. No one spotted me when my transmission died on the highway 3 years ago. I figured it out. But somehow, being single and child-free in my family meant I was the one with extra. My brother is 37. He has a wife and 2 kids, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. They bought a house 4 years ago in a suburb about 40 minutes from where we grew up. My mom lives in the same town she always has. My brother is 20 minutes from her. I'm 3 hours away, which my family treats like a personal inconvenience I inflicted on them. It started small, the way these things always do. $100 here, covering a grocery run there. Then it became a phone bill. Then 2 months of car insurance for my brother when his wife quit her job after their second kid was born. Then the ask that I think broke something permanently in me, the mortgage. It was 2 years ago. My mom called on a Tuesday night. I was eating leftovers and watching something on TV, and I almost didn't pick up. I wish I hadn't. She said they were behind. 3 months behind on the mortgage. My stepfather had cut his hours at work because of a back injury, and between that and some credit card debt that had gotten out of hand, they were looking at foreclosure notices. She didn't say, "Can you help?" She said, "I don't know what we're going to do." And she said it in a way that made the next sentence mine to fill. I transferred $6,200 over 2 weeks. I did not eat out once in the following 3 months. I canceled a trip I had been planning with a friend, a long weekend to Nashville that I'd been looking forward to for months. I told my friend I'd had a family emergency. That wasn't a lie exactly. I told myself this was a one-time thing. Families help each other. That's what you do. My brother called me a week after my mom told him what I'd done. He didn't say thank you. He said, "I'm really glad you were able to help out," past tense, like it was already over and filed away. After the mortgage, the asks got easier, not smaller, easier. Like I had set a precedent and now we all understood my role. I covered my brother's kids' daycare for 2 months when they had a gap between assistance programs. I bought my mom a new laptop when hers died because she needed it for work stuff. I paid the deductible when my stepfather had a procedure done and their insurance didn't cover everything. Each time, I told myself it was fine. Each time, I told myself it was fine. Each time, something small and quiet inside me said, "Is it?" Last spring, my mom called on a Wednesday evening. I was tired. I'd had a long week, the kind where you're running on coffee and obligation, and when I saw her name on my phone, I felt something I didn't want to name. Not love. Not annoyance. Exactly. Something heavier than both. She asked how I was. I said fine, tired. She made a sympathetic sound and then said she wanted to talk to me about something. My brother had been thinking, she said, about taking the family on a trip. The kids had never been to Florida. He'd been working really hard, and his wife had been through a lot with the younger one having some health stuff this past year, and they just felt like the family needed something to look forward to. She said family the way she sometimes does, like it includes everyone but somehow still means just them. I said that sounded really nice. She paused. Then she said, "And I want to get this right because I've replayed it so many times," she said. "We've been so stretched thin, honey. You know how things have been. We just can't swing it for everyone. We can barely swing it for them." I understood what she was saying. She was saying I wasn't going. I said something like, "Oh, sure, yeah, I get it." I made my voice light. "I am very good at making my voice light," she said. "You understand, right? It's just with everything going on, we don't have it in the budget." I said, "Of course." I said, "Have a great trip." I said, "Give the kids a hug from me." We hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. I didn't cry. I wasn't even sure what I felt. It was something quieter than sadness, more like the slow recognition of something that had been true for a long time, but that I had been choosing not to look at directly. 3 weeks later, I had a work trip. I was flying out on a Thursday morning, early. The kind of early where the airport is still half asleep and everyone's moving slowly with their coffee cups and their carry-ons. I was in line at security when I heard a voice I recognized. My stepfather. That particular way he has of talking to strangers like he's doing them a favor. I turned around, and there they were. My mom, my stepfather, my brother, his wife, and their 2 kids. All of them. Rolling luggage, the little one in a stroller, the older one wearing those kid headphones that cost more than my first paycheck. My mom saw me at the same moment I saw her. The look on her face was something I will never forget as long as I live. It lasted less than a second. This flash of something, before she rearranged it into a smile and lifted her hand in a little wave. I waved back. I don't know how. My brother said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" in the casual tone of someone who is not currently living inside the worst irony of my life. I said I had a work thing. I asked where they were headed. My mom said Florida. Like it was obvious. Like I'd just forgotten. My brother's wife said the kids were so excited. The older one looked up at me with absolute sincerity and said they were going to see dolphins. I told him that was amazing. I meant it. None of this was his fault. We got through security together and somehow ended up at the same terminal. I watched them check the departure board. I watched my brother pull out his phone and show his wife something, and she laughed, and I thought, that's a normal thing. That's a fine thing. People go on trips. None of this is criminal. And then I saw them walk toward the boarding area, and I saw the sign above the lane they walked into. First class. My brother was holding the boarding passes, and he handed them to the agent, and she smiled at them and waved them through. And I stood there in the general boarding line in my work blazer, with my backpack over one shoulder, and I felt the floor shift slightly under me. It wasn't the first class that broke something in me. It was the math. It was the quiet, irrefutable math of it. They could not afford to bring me. They were stretched thin. The budget didn't have room for everyone, but it had room for first class. I got on my plane. I sat in my seat. I put my headphones on and I stared out the window for the first 40 minutes of the flight, and I didn't think about anything coherent. Just fragments. The $6,200. The Nashville trip I didn't take. The deductible. The daycare. We just can't swing it for everyone. When I landed, I had 3 texts from my brother. The first was a photo of his kids at the terminal looking excited. The second was a video of the plane, shot from a wider seat than mine. The third was a message that said, "Kids are loving it already. Wish you could have made it." I read that last one twice. I put my phone in my pocket. I went to my work meeting. I was completely professional. I'm very good at that. That night in my hotel room, I did something I'd never done before. I opened a notes app on my phone and I started writing down every single financial contribution I had made to my family over the past 4 years. Not from memory alone. I actually went through my bank statements, which I keep archived. I sat cross-legged on a hotel bed in a city that wasn't mine, and I went through every transfer, every Venmo, every check. I stopped when I reached $37,000. That was just what I could account for. That didn't include the times I'd paid for dinners, or the birthday gifts from my niece and nephew that I'd quietly upgraded because I knew my brother hadn't gotten around to ordering anything. That didn't include the time I drove 3 hours to help my mom move furniture because my stepfather's back was acting up. $37,000 over 4 years. More than my first year's salary out of college. I closed the notes app. I slept badly. I flew home the next afternoon. My mom called me 2 days after they got back from Florida. She said the trip was wonderful. She said the kids had the best time. She said my nephew had cried when they had to leave. She said she wished things were different and I could have come. I said, Mom, I need to ask you something. She said, of course, what is it? I said, did you fly first class? There was a pause. Not a long pause, but a specific kind of pause, the kind that contains a decision. She said, your brother got a good deal on the tickets. He found something online. It wasn't as expensive as you'd think. I said, but you did fly first class. She said, honey, that's not really the point. I said, it kind of is, actually. She started explaining. She said my brother had been under a lot of stress, and that the kids are at a hard age for long flights, and that it wasn't about me. It was about what made sense for their situation. She said she hadn't wanted to make me feel left out. She said things had just been so hard. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. I have spent my whole life not interrupting. When she finished, I said, you told me you couldn't afford to include me. And then you flew first class. I'm not asking you to apologize for going on the trip. I'm asking you to understand why this is hard for me to sit with. She said she understood. She said she was sorry if I felt that way. If I felt that way. Like my feelings were a weather condition that had rolled in unexpectedly. 2 days after that, my brother called. I knew before I picked up that my mom had talked to him. I could tell by the particular energy in his hello. That careful, slightly defensive energy that means someone has briefed him. He said he'd heard I was upset. He said he got it, he understood. But he wanted to give me some context. He said first class had been a splurge, yes, but they had used points, and it wasn't something they did all the time. And his wife had been through a really hard year, and the kids at that age on a long flight. And then he said it. He said, look, you don't have kids. You don't really know what it's like to manage all of this. It's a different kind of financial pressure that you don't have that experience. I stayed quiet for a moment. And then, for the first time in 6 years, I said the thing I was actually thinking. I said, you're right that I don't have kids. But I do know what it costs to cover 2 months of daycare. I know what your mortgage deductible looks like. I know the exact amount of money I've sent to this family in the last 4 years because I counted it last week and it was $37,000. So when you tell me I don't understand financial pressure, I actually think I might understand it better than you think. He was quiet. I said, I'm not asking you to pay me back. I helped because I wanted to. But I am asking you to stop explaining to me what financial hardship looks like. He said some things after that. He said I was being unfair, that I was making it about money when it wasn't about money. He said he'd never asked me to give them anything, that it had always been my choice. He said he felt like I was holding things over them. I didn't argue with any of it. I said I needed some time, and I got off the phone. That night, I transferred the money that would normally have gone to my mom's phone bill, which I'd been paying for 2 years, back into my own account. I didn't cancel anything dramatically. I didn't announce it. I just stopped setting up the payment. Over the next few weeks, I stopped several things. The phone bill, the bi-monthly, just-in-case transfer I'd been sending my mom, the Amazon purchases I'd been making for my brother's kids that I'd convinced myself were gifts, but were, if I'm being honest, just attempts to feel connected to a part of the family that barely noticed I existed. My mom called twice that month. Both times she said nothing about the money at first, just talked about general things. The second time, near the end of the call, she mentioned that her phone bill seemed off. Had I noticed anything? I said I'd stopped setting up the payment. She said, oh. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, okay, that was it. No explosion. No real confrontation. Just, okay. I think some part of her had been waiting for this. I think some part of her had been waiting for this. I think some part of all of them had known, on some level, that this arrangement was not sustainable. That I had been functioning as a financial resource, and that resources eventually run out or walk away. My brother texted me a few weeks later. He said he hoped I was okay. He said he thought we should talk when I was ready. I haven't responded yet. I'm not being cruel, I'm just taking the time I said I needed. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm actually taking it instead of rushing to smooth everything over. My friend, the one I had to cancel Nashville with, we finally went. Not to Nashville, somewhere else. We spent 4 days somewhere with good food and no agenda, and I didn't check my phone more than twice a day. And on the second afternoon, I sat outside with a glass of something cold and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Light. That's the only word I have for it. Just light, like something had been lifted that I'd carried so long I'd stopped noticing it was heavy. I don't know what happens next with my family. I genuinely don't. I'm not planning a dramatic speech or a final accounting. I'm not cutting them off. I'm just no longer available in the way I used to be available, automatically, silently, at any hour, for any amount. What I know is this: for 6 years I told myself I was being a good daughter, a good sister, and sometimes I was. But I was also telling myself a story where I was essential, where my giving was making things better, where one day they would look at me and really see what I'd contributed and love me properly for it. They didn't. And maybe they couldn't have. Maybe the version of me that gave without limits made it impossible for them to see limits as real. I'm rewriting it now. Not dramatically. Quietly, the way I do most things. I'm rewriting the part where I am a supporting character in everyone else's story, and starting to figure out what it looks like to be the main one in mine. It turns out it looks pretty good from here. I've thought a lot about what I would tell someone who's standing where I was standing 2 years ago, in that airport line, holding an economy boarding pass, watching the people she'd been quietly carrying walk into first class without looking back. I don't think I'd give them a list. I don't think I'd say, here are the steps. Life doesn't really work that way, and anyone who's been in that kind of situation knows that advice, however well-meaning, tends to land hollow when you're still inside the hurt. What I would say is this: the way people treat you is information, not a judgment about your worth. Just information. And for a long time, I refused to read it. I kept telling myself that my family's behavior was a temporary condition, that if I was patient enough, generous enough, available enough, something would shift. I thought giving was the language that would eventually make them see me. It didn't. Because generosity only works as a bridge when both people are walking toward each other. When you're the only one moving, it's not a bridge. It's just distance you're covering alone. There's something that happens when you finally stop. Not dramatically. I didn't make speeches. I didn't send long emails. I didn't wait for a perfect moment of confrontation. I just quietly became unavailable in the ways I had always been automatically available. And what I found on the other side of that silence was not the guilt I expected. It was clarity. I could finally see the shape of what had been happening. Not because I was angry, though I had been, but because the noise of constant obligation had stopped, and in the quiet I could finally think straight. I think about the $37,000 sometimes. Not with bitterness, mostly. More like you'd look at an old receipt for something you bought before you understood its real price. I paid for a version of belonging that was never actually on offer. I paid to be included, and I got transaction in return. That's not anyone's fault in a simple, clean way. People build patterns, and then they live inside them, and after a while, the patterns feel like just the way things are. My role in that family had calcified into something fixed, and I had helped it calcify by never pushing back. What changed me wasn't the first-class seats, it was the math. It was sitting in a hotel room and adding up 4 years of my own choices and seeing, clearly and without any softening, what I had been choosing, not what had been choosing, not what had been done to me, what I had been choosing. That's the part that required real honesty. Because it's easier to be a victim of circumstances than to reckon with the ways you participated in your own diminishment. The courage it takes to stop is underrated. People talk about courage like it's loud, like it's arguments and ultimatums and declarations. But the courage I needed was quieter than that. It was just the willingness to sit with discomfort instead of immediately soothing it with another transfer, another yes, another, of course, no worries. That quiet courage is something anyone can find, not because they're strong in some exceptional way, but because humans are built to recalibrate when they finally let themselves feel the full weight of what they've been carrying. I'm not at the end of this story. My family and I are in something unresolved, and I don't know yet what it becomes. But I know who I am in it now. And that, more than any reconciliation or confrontation, feels like the thing worth keeping.